Good morning, everyone. I will reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners. Today is Wednesday, June 26, 2024. And the first item we have up for business today is a public hearing and Order 24062601, Lane County Home Rule Charter Amendments for consideration. As many of you know, we often have a few folks coming for public comment, but today we have more than usual because this is a public hearing on a public document. And we typically allow 3 minutes for public comment, and this is the only hearing on our agenda for today. We do have a public works item after, but in talking with our Assistant County Administrator and Vice Chair, we would like colleagues to keep us to allowing 3 minutes of public comment so we hear from everyone. We do have about 20 folks each in person and online, give or take. And so just making sure folks are aware and okay with, colleagues with allowing time for public comment, 3 minutes a person. And county administrators working with staff on our public works item if we need to adjust that later this morning for our work session. Staff can accommodate. So great, thank you all for that. And to staff managing the sign-ins, I'd like to close the sign-in at 9:05. Great, thank you. All right, well then with that, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. And we have representing our Office of County Counsel, Assistant Counsel Steve Thiel, and Jenna Kuzmano from our Office of Economic Development, and our Chief of Staff, Judy Williams, here to present this item before we open the public hearing, just to create some context and so everyone knows what we're here to talk about and a little bit of the history behind it. Good morning, welcome, thank you for being here. I'll turn it over to staff.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Trieger, Vice Chair Love, all commissioners. So this has been a long process to get here today. Almost exactly 2 years ago, we first met with the board to talk about convening the Charter Review Committee. So we're going to go ahead and give a little bit of an overview of what that process has looked like to lead us here to this public hearing. So we'll be discussing that timeline, the sections that we have recommended from the Charter Review Committee for repeal, as well as a couple sections that they recommended some revisions on. We'll talk about next steps after today's public hearing, which will mostly revolve around July 9th, which we have some time reserved on the board's agenda for further discussion and potential decisions or actions that you can take. So October 11th, 2022, the initial 5 committee members of the Charter Review Committee were appointed by the board. Subsequently, on December 6th, 2022, the outstanding 2 committee members were appointed from recommendations on those already 5-seated 5 committee members. From December 2022 through October 2023, so a little less than a year, the committee met bi-monthly, held 19 meetings. They had an interested parties list. There is a page on the county's website devoted to their work, which contained all of the meeting agendas, minutes, recordings of every meeting. Each meeting did start off with a public comment opportunity for folks wishing to engage in the process. They conducted 2 community surveys, engaged staff to provide presentations on related components of the charter, and conducted as much public outreach as possible, which, given some of the constraints around the committee's timeline, was relatively limited. On October 11th, 2023, the Charter Review Committee presented to the board their final report and recommendations. Subsequent to that, on November 8th, 2023, the board held a work session on those recommendations. Then this past April 30th, the board discussed specifically the recommendations around repeal. At that time, you all moved to hold a public hearing on each of those 3 items recommended for repeal, and subsequently did the same at the May 7th meeting with the 3 sections recommended for revision. So here today, we're at June 26, which is the public hearing for those 6 charter amendment recommendations, the 3 repeals as well as the 3 revisions. July 9th is our next time before you all to discuss, for you to have the time to discuss those proposed charter amendments and take any potential action. So the current Charter Review Committee, their term is slated to end October 11th, 2024. Since they presented their final report October 11th, 2023, the board has not directed that they engage in any further action, so they have not been meeting since October of last year.
I'm going to briefly, it looks like all of the information that we have presented to you is in the board packet. All of the public comments that we've had thus far are also attached to our agenda. It looks like an older version of the PowerPoint is loaded here, so I will focus just on some key points. Really, the next steps after today are really looking at if the board is interested in moving any of the items forward, any of the amendments. We have a template board order that's also in your packet that's kind of ready to go if you were wanting to move, one out of the six, all of the six, none of them. We can kind of customize that and move forward. The other aspect we've touched on briefly before is if there was any desire to have the voters pamphlet explanatory statement. So if there was interest, again, at that July 9th date, you could talk about potentially creating that committee to work on an explanatory statement. So specifically, there's, as I mentioned, a board order that's attached to the information today in the packet that could be ready to go if you were ready to make a decision, and that essentially puts the items on a ballot to give to the county clerk in time. There would be a follow-up board order if you were wanting to do the voters pamphlet aspect. So in terms of dates, the ballot titles to be filed with Elections Office, if you were working on a November 2024 election, and again, that's a big if, the board has not committed to that, but we're kind of working on timelines. If the November 2024 election was your desire to get these items, August 16th is that drop deadline to get the ballot titles to the clerk. So our last board meeting that you could potentially have action to do that is August 6th. So just so you have some aspects on next steps. Voters pamphlet deadline is noon on August 27th. And again, the measure filing form due to the clerk September 5th, 2024.
So just to briefly go over some of those or all of the amendments that the Charter Review Committee recommended. So briefly for the repeals, the repeal of Section 32 around spending limitation, Section 33, East Alton Baker Park, Section 34, the income tax cap. And so within the Charter Review Committee's final report that they had provided to the board on October 11th, with each of those issues, they provided background to the item as well as some of the discussion as to their reasoning for that recommendation. So I don't really want to belabor all of those points. That's all within the report and the packet, and we've discussed it before. I really do want to allow a lot of time for public comment today at the hearing. And then also the three recommendations around revisions. So section 10.3.c to revise the titles and descriptions of the commissioner districts. So the main gist of that was around potentially removing the names of the commissioner districts, replacing them with a number, and perhaps changing a bit of the language around those commissioner districts. Sections 10.3.d and 10.3.e to revise the redistricting process and establish the independent redistricting committee in the charter. It's not currently a component of the charter, but this was part of the recommendations provided from the committee. As well as Section 35 to revise the Charter Review Committee. And some of those recommendations specifically for the revisions were around what the committee had felt was constraints with regard to their timing. They essentially only had a year in which they were able to conduct their full breadth of work, research with staff, public outreach and engagement before they had to come before you all to make that final report. So some of the revision language was around tweaking that to allow some more time for them to do more in-depth work if they wished.
So just before we turn it over to public comment, again, reiterating what the purpose here today is to hear from the public of what you were requesting. So again, there is a board order attached. If there was a desire to have a decision made today, that information is in your board packet. Otherwise, we have July 9th set aside for some time that we will come back before you. In addition to the three of us here at the table, for the four of us here at the table. We will also be inviting Dina Dawson, our county clerk, to that discussion as well for any additional questions specific to either the voters pamphlet details or costs or, just general inquiries from her as well. And so we have a board order that we will bring back to you on the 9th. Again, if there was a decision moving forward to move one items, 2 or 3 forward, we could come back with a consent calendar item to incorporate what your decision was at a later time. So thank you very much for that time, and we'll turn it back over to you, Chair, for any comments before we head to public hearing.
Great, thank you so much. Just a couple of items before we move into the public hearing, and we have closed sign up for public hearing at this time. It is 9:10 for a 9 a.m. item, and so Tanya understands anyone online who has not registered before now will not be included in today's hearing, and Cameron is bringing the sheets to me for the sign up. Thank you. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, let staff do their job, please, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Cameron. And I also just want to note, Commissioner Buck is joining us. She is remote online, so we do have all 5 commissioners today. Anyone watching online, the materials that were presented, including the full report from the Charter Review Committee, is included in the agenda item materials. All public comment received on this topic is linked in the public hearing view materials section on the online agenda. The cutoff for that was noon Monday because this today is considered part of our Tuesday meeting, but staff assures me that anything received after that cutoff will be uploaded to the item for our July 9th. So if you submitted public comment via email past noon Monday, it will still become part of the record on this item. It will just upload to the packet for our July 9th meeting. I do want to also make a statement / a question for staff. You've been talking about July 9th as if that is when we will come back and potentially deliberate, but we had talked about when we set this date, setting this date and July 9th for public hearings. So I want to ensure when we talk as an agenda team that we leave time for more public comment on July 9th. There are still, by my count, 3 other meetings between that date and the August cutoff. So just as a note, and we can talk more about that in agenda setting, but that was my understanding, looking at my colleagues, when we set this date, that we set the 2 dates, today and July 9th. Thank you. Great. All right. Well, then with that, we will move into public comment. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. We take people in the order in which they signed up. We will start with folks here in Harris Hall, and then we will move to receive online comment. And Tanya will run the online public comment. For everyone, there is a clock set at 3 minutes, so when I call your name, please step to the podium. Take a breath if you've never given public comment before. It's not that scary. Please state your name for the record, and that is when your timer will begin. And I'd ask you to please do your best to keep an eye on the clock, but I will be announcing when your time has expired. And so with that, first up is Nancy Mills, and Nancy will be followed by Austin Folnegi. Good morning, welcome. Please state your name for the record, and your time will begin.
My name is Nancy Mills, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to speak with you. And I want to say a little bit about my interaction with you, which has always been by webinar. And I started listening to the webinars when I was interested in learning about homelessness in Lane County, and I really appreciated the way that the commission acted, the presentations by staff. It just made me feel good to be in Lane County. So thank you for that. So I'm here today to talk about process primarily. I'm a scientist, and process is really important. And I'm concerned about the letter from Stan Long that was submitted to be considered for possible referral to the ballot. The Charter Review Committee has considered a number of ideas, including some of those in the memo, but decided to go with other recommendations. However, that letter was submitted independently, and most concernedly was sent to county staff for inclusion in the agenda for this meeting. That goes beyond what I understand to be the normal treatment for public opinion and gives unfair elevation to the ideas in the letter. I'm pleased that it's now considered as public opinion, as public comment. I'm also concerned about the Second Amendment that's suggested in that letter, which was described as basically housekeeping, which changes the boundaries of districts without input and also ignores the recommendation that districts be given names. The impropriety of suggesting a map without public comment is self-evident. Now, the question of numbers versus geographic names for districts originally flummoxed me. I thought, why does this matter? And then I realized that having geographic names for districts encourages the residents and their commissioner to view that district in a tribal way. When I say I'm from South Eugene and I'm in the South Eugene district, there are assumptions that accompany that designation. The danger is that commissioners will represent the predominant tribe rather than all residents within the district. The way that you reduce the impact of tribes is to have diverse districts. A primary challenge for democracy in this country is the division into tribes that find it hard to speak with one another. We certainly don't want to encourage that in Lane County. And with my remaining 20 seconds, what I'd also like to say is I watched the way that you guys operated with the folks who were trying to put the Row River Fire Protection District in. And I watched the pleasure that you had when they got it on the ballot. And it just made me feel like this is how government should work. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Austin Folnege, and he will be followed by Duncan Murray. And in advance, please apologies for any name mispronunciations. When you state your name for the record, I assume you'll do it the right way. Thank you. Good morning.
No worries. Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Folnege. I'm the current chair of Lane Community College and also the incoming president for Oregon Community College Association. I don't represent the board or the board comments or the institutions that I represent, but I will speak from personal experience as a board member and also this process here. I also want to speak just concerns in regards to the letter dated May 25th and regards to how it's outside of the process of the committee and of the in regards to the Lane County's political map. I also just want to also state and remind that there's other local governments that rely on how the county redistricts and makes their districts. Lane Community College, for instance, we actually delayed our redistricting process, waiting for the county's redistricting maps. So I just wanted to state that this isn't just a redistricting process for Lane County, but also impacts other local governments. And I want that to be front of mind when you make these decisions in regards to everything you're looking at today. And overall, I do feel that we want to make sure that we follow the processes. We want to make sure that this independent committee is given the power and the ability to do the work that they need to do. And I feel that they have done that work. That work has been taken a year to process and so forth. And I think that their recommendations should be heavily not only front of mind, but considered. Overall, I think that just keep in mind that local governments also rely on your redistricting process. Keep that in mind as you continue to hear public comment. I will also have some additional documentation for you to review in your July 9th meeting. Lastly, I just wanted to take a personal note here in that I live up the McKenzie River area. I want to thank you for the work that you've done to help rebuild my community. I also want to put thoughts and prayers out for Lapine, who is recently in evacuation. If there's any way we can help our neighbors over in Deschutes County, I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Duncan Murray, who will be followed by Steve Kornacchia.
My name is Duncan Murray. I live in North Eugene. The legitimacy of any government rests upon the public believing three things about it. First, that its processes are transparent. Then, that it honestly describes its decision-making. And finally, and maybe most important, is that it understands that it is voters who select a government, not the other way around. The so-called Independent Redistricting Commission of 2021 cuts across most, if not all, of these standards of good governance. First, it's structured to ensure the re-election of county commissioners. The county commission appoints 5 members, who in turn appoint another 10 members. The total is 15, each of whom is beholden to and whose decisions will be influenced by the county commissioner who appointed him or her. There's also a strong possibility that some of the IRC members benefited financially from their position and from the county commission. And finally, the IRC contained several members who were significant contributors to the county commissioners' campaigns. We can do better than that, and the proposed IRC does just that. First and most important, the members are chosen by lot randomly from a pool of volunteers for the positions. Then there are standards, high standards of ethics and conflicts of interest, which are imposed on these members. And finally, each county commission district is represented equally. So I hope that you join me in wanting and believing that the Lane County voters and all citizens deserve a truly independent redistricting commission that is not influenced by the wishes or desires of county commissioners who are trying to advance their own political agendas. If you do agree with me on that principle, please refer this proposal to the public for its final verdict on it. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Steve Kornakia, who will be followed by Stefan Ostrak.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Steve Kornakia. I served as Springfield's County Commissioner and as a member of your Charter Review Committee. And I'm going to read this so I can stay within my 3 minutes and you don't have to reel me in. My testimony today is similar to what I gave to you earlier and contains 2 similar points. First, the Charter Review Committee's recommendations to you have merit, and they are the result of superlative work by the committee and its very capable staff, Jenna and Judy, particularly Morgan Monroe as its chair, and Stefan Ostrich, who was classic Stefan. Second, while the recommended changes have merit, they're not essential. They're not essential to the provision of county services, nor are they essential to the lives of Lane County residents. They would be nice to have, but they're not essential. During a budget crisis, wherein you're cutting services from departments that aren't currently supplying an adequate level of service, the idea of cutting an essential Lane County prosecutor or an essential sheriff's deputy or an essential appraiser with assessment and taxation to pay for this election would be budgetary malpractice. I would, however, like to alter my testimony to lend my support for your consideration of placing the citizen-produced redistricting proposal before the voters. With my previous testimony, I had figured that my participation in this exercise was over. But then Mr. Gary and Mr. Long submitted a redistricting proposal that Jenna provided to each of us on the committee. My first reaction was, what's this? In my time, there was never a suggestion for doing an inappropriate action to affect an election. But because I have known these men for my entire professional life and have ultimate respect for both of them, my curiosity was piqued. Many folks in this community know that I'm a retired Green Beret and that I live a Green Beret's life of service, leadership, integrity, and honor. Bill and Stan are my kind of people. They are honorable men who apparently sincerely believe that redistricting in Lane County attracts characters who would attempt to affect elections, and that keeping them out of redistricting and the redistricting process is essential to the community. Their proposal would ban all insiders, players, operatives, and politicians from participating. Something like what you would hear in a Tom Petty song. don't come around here no more. I kind of like that. Don't come around here no more. Pretty much makes it essential. Furthermore, the proposal's description of the districts matches my experience with
Sir,
the footprint of Lane County.
your time has expired. Thank
Oh,
you
has
for
it?
your public
Okay,
comment.
I'll wrap it up here real quick.
Your time has expired,
the-
sir. Thank you for your public comment. We have
Thank
quite
you.
a few people waiting to speak, so I'm going to ask
I'll be
you to
right-
please move along so we can take the next person.
Thank
you so much. Next up is Stefan Ostrak, and he will be followed by Victoria Krautzak.
Chair Trieger and Commissioners, my name is Stefan Ostrak. I live in unincorporated River Road neighborhood, and I had the privilege and honor of serving on both the redistricting committee and the charter review committee. And I stand before you asking that you submit all of the recommendations of the charter review committee to the voters as drafted by the charter review committee, and reject the last-minute submission from Harang Long, which, as has already been pointed out, was way outside the process and way late to the game. Stan Long has showed no interest in the redistricting process, no interest in charter review, never appeared at any meeting of either committee, did not submit any testimony to other committee, and comes late and proposes a substitute. His proposal would be an end run around the recent redistricting process and charter review process. It would waste the considerable time and money devoted through staff time in particular to both processes over the course of the last several years. And it's not pegged to the census. Why would we redistrict again in 2025, especially when the county budget is under pressure? It would be very expensive to do that. The proposal purports to be good government, and it has lots of nice words in it about respecting the geographic integrity, minimizing the division of city, county, local, neighborhood, and school districts. Yet what's really going on here is a stealth gerrymandering. By arbitrarily designated Roosevelt Boulevard as the boundary between North and South Eugene districts, it would do exactly the opposite of what it purports to do. Roosevelt Boulevard is not the boundary of any school district, ward, school catchment area, or neighborhood. Roosevelt Boulevard is a boundary would split the North Eugene High School catchment area. Roosevelt Boulevard would split the Bethel School District. Roosevelt Boulevard would split multiple Eugene City wards. Roosevelt Boulevard would split established neighborhoods. The only thing Roosevelt Boulevard would do would be to ensure that the two areas of Eugene that are thought to be liberal and progressive would be in the same district. And worst of all, it would split census tracts. The whole process is based on a jigsaw puzzle using census tracts, and Roosevelt Boulevard has no relation to any census tract. Would be very expensive for the county to hire demographers. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Victoria Krautzak, followed by Joy Marshall.
Hello, my name is Victoria Krautzak. Thank you for your time, for this time to speak. Although I've been interested in politics for many years, it was mainly on federal level and governorships. I'm here because I finally realized the importance of the grassroots, and I want to be involved and do my part. I live in District 1, West Lane, and I love Florence and our beautiful Oregon coast, but thankfully, I only had to drive 5 minutes from my home to get here. I live off River Road, below the Randy Pappy Highway, which brings me to my first point. Regarding revision of district name descriptors, I prefer it remain as it is in the charter right now, a number and geographic name. I know I'm not alone in this. Just last year, 2 separate surveys conducted by your Charter Review Committee showed that a majority felt the same way. And if for some reason it is imperative to have only one descriptor, I'd go for the geographic name. It's more transparent, and perhaps that transparency will help curb or even prevent gerrymandering. With just a number, gerrymandering attempts are less conspicuous, and as gerrymandering continues, the potential for every district to be represented by someone from Eugene is very real. How would that be equal protection under the law if, for example, your elected representative cannot understand or empathize with the challenges of a rural community? Point two, I think having an independent redistricting committee is a good idea if the emphasis is on independent. However, I question how independent the committee is when the commissioners get to pick the first 5, who in turn pick the next 10 and 3 alternates. How many donors, significant others, lobbyists, or politicians will wind up on the committee? How independent will it really be? Are the mechanisms in place to vet this and make sure it doesn't happen? I don't know, but I doubt it. What I do know is that there is a proposal that incorporates conflict of interest checks on applicants. It also recommends revising the redistricting process, but instead of the IRC, it establishes the CRC, the Citizens Redistricting Commission, in the charter. Our country, state, counties need more grassroots, more citizen involvement. We need our elected officials to lead us more and rule over us less. More of our governance needs to be driven by we the people. Or as my commissioner, Commissioner Senega, said it, people, not politicians. I ask you to please give the Bill Gary Harang Long proposal fair and serious consideration. Point 3, I would like to keep sections 32, spending limitation, and 34, income tax cap, in the charter. The arguments for removing them are very good, they make sense, but I like having these in place as preemptive mechanisms to guard against wasteful spending or punitive taxation that might come in the future. Hopefully that will not happen. Hopefully these will never have to be used. I thank all of you for your public service. God bless you. Seek wisdom from him.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Joy Marshall, who will be followed by Larry Koenigsberg.
Hi, good morning. My name is Joy Marshall. Thanks for your service and for the opportunity to speak today. I've lived in Lane County for 34 years and been very involved in many volunteer efforts. I'm here today just as an individual because I'm very concerned about what I see as an undemocratic effort to undo our election voting boundaries, and I've done some research. Here's my thinking. Every 10 years, because of the census, we have to look at the population shifts. Some populations have grown, some have shrunk, and so we're required to refigure our election boundaries so that the districts are of equal population. That makes sense. However, 10 years ago in Lane County, the process did become very contentious. It was looked at as political. And so to your credit, the county created a fair and independent commission to redo the boundaries. And so after this census, we had a 15-member independent citizen committee. I looked at the list of people. They were very independent. They represented the political spectrum, and they were charged and took their charge very seriously with creating maps and doing robust public outreach. They had over 600 people weigh in on what the boundaries should be. And those people weighed in good faith that their comments would be taken seriously. They came up with maps. They were approved. Those maps have been in use for 2 years. That is good local government. That was transparent. Now we're looking right now at a completely different issue. That is the county charter, like our Constitution. Again, an appointed independent group worked very hard, which you've heard, and they came up with some proposals that you were looking at. They were not charged with redrawing the maps. That was done. That was done in an open process with hundreds of people giving input, as it should have been. And it looked, again, like the proposals they've come up with, you're considering. Again, it looks like good local government. However, out of the blue on May 24th, this letter appears, and from a local lawyer, and it suggests, among other comments that should be just considered with other public comments, basically reworking the maps, redrawing our election maps. And this is not a legitimate purpose of the Charter Review Committee. Again, the time to do that was 2 years ago when we all were getting the input, and suddenly one person can come in and do an end run around that robust political process. I think that that is not transparent, and there is no legitimate reason to undo our current maps. If for some reason you truly feel that there is, we need to go through another public process. I believe that that transparency would build trust. I hope that you do too, and I hope that you will not proceed with this 11th hour attempt to circumvent the democratic process and all that hard work of that committee. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Larry Koenigsberg, who will be followed by W. Scott Bartlett.
My name is Bernard Koenigsberg. I go by Larry Koenigsberg as a result of parental confusion. So we have district numbers. I'm from Eugene, and we have district numbers in a number of our local areas for eWeb, for the school board, for the city council. And in my view, they do help to prevent different groups from being pitted against each other on a geographic basis. So I like this, the idea of having district numbers. What I don't like is the idea of setting up these districts so as to favor a particular group or a particular county commissioner. To me, it smacks of gerrymandering. It smacks of the commissioners, the current majority on the commission, choosing their voters because they are fearful of having to face a wider set of voters. So my request to you, now that the 3 members on the commission form a majority, don't drive this process like you stole it. Let it go the way it was intended when the Independent Redistricting Commission set it up. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is W. Scott Bartlett, who will be followed by Deborah McGee.
Honorable Commissioners, my name is Scott Bartlett. I have lived here since 1965, and I've tried to be a volunteer with Lane County since, I think 1970. And in that time, I was a member of the Budget Committee for 15 years and dozens of committees, and still try to assist where I can. Honorable Commissioners, I come before you not for your agreement, but just your fair hearing. I remember being on a redistricting committee in 2001 or 2011, and in the course of that, I was trying to design maps for a prospective redistricting scenario. And the person, a very fine person who was helping me, said, "Hey, Scott, if you move this number down, if you move this line down right here, east, you can add 12,000 more Democrats to this district." And I immediately felt uneasy about it, just instinctively, and I rejected it. And what I was thinking is that the people out there don't think about redistricting by and large. They don't know anything about it, but they trust us to do something that's honorable and fair and balanced. Now, I understand that county commission dynamics are a matter of mathematics and counting to 3. I respect that. And I don't know the particulars of this. I read that ordinance yesterday. There are many ways that you can manipulate the field of applicants to be on this redistricting committee. There are flaws in this, and the fact is, if you precipitously go through it, you could have unanticipated consequences. I was an aide to Wayne Morse, and I remember that Wayne Morse said that to me and to other people, your substantive rights are no greater than your procedural rights. And I understand that there seems to be a sense of urgency about implementing this. Perhaps it's to impact the 2026 election. I understand that every one of you has an interest and a stake in making sure your districts reflect what you think is the appropriate, and what you know to be the appropriate composition of your district. But I just say this. Be honorable and be fair. I don't mean to be condescending and saying this to you, but there is a law of cause and effect, and I'd be careful about violating that. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Deborah McGee, who will be followed by Patricia Hine.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Deborah McGee. I reside in Commissioner Buck's district. I've lived in Lane County for 45 years. In the mid-1980s, I finally found and purchased my 5 acres in rural Lane County, about 15 minutes outside of Eugene. I was not politically involved then, but when I received notice that I had suddenly changed county districts, I came to the commissioners' meeting and said my farm hadn't moved, so why am I now in East Lane? Later, I came to understand that political gerrymandering is how a certain demographic of voters are pushed into one specific district so that they can make it so the other districts are solidly a predictable voting demographic that keeps the political hold on an area. So I have a high degree of mistrust about why now? Why, when there is a conservative majority, do you suddenly want to go outside of established procedure of the Charter Review Committee process and accept the plan of one citizen? Smells rotten to me, commissioners. It's a rotten smell on you. You want to go around the established procedure and do what some local lawyer put up. Take the recommendations of the Charter Review Committee process, make it fair, follow the rules, do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Patricia Hine, who will be followed by Beatrice McKenzie.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Patty Hine. I'm a retired naval officer and longtime educator and active citizen in this fine county. I reside in Commissioner Buck's district. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment during this public hearing this morning. I would like to voice my support for the recommendations of the Charter Review Committee and to voice my opposition to the proposals made by Mr. Stan Long. This alternate 11th hour proposal, which now strangely enjoys equal standing with the Charter Review Committee's proposal, ignores and disrespects the transparent, rigorous work of the Independent Redistricting Committee. A last-minute, partisan, unvetted proposal around redistricting smacks of gerrymandering, a political tool long used to disenfranchise voters. I smell a rat. If Mr. Long wanted to develop proposals, he could have participated early on in the Charter Review process or sought a seat on the Redistricting Committee. What is the real reason for Mr. Long's proposal? Does it increase public participation? Does it improve access for residents to county services? No. Mr. Long's proposal imposes additional barriers to serving on the committee, making it more difficult for people to participate. It also disingenuously packs the voters in the Whitaker neighborhood into an already progressive-leaning South District, leaving Commissioner Farr's North District more conservative, ensuring a conservative majority on the commission. And why would Mr. Long's proposal reject changing from confusing geographical district names to numbers, which would plainly make more sense, as you can easily see if you look at the East Lane map, which wraps north and south of the central districts and includes city residents? Mr. Long's proposal flies in the face of and undermines an established process and would ultimately disenfranchise Lane voters. It should not have to be said. You represent us. You work for us. For people to have trust in their government, those in government must do their work transparently, with public participation, according to a set of agreed upon and guidelines and standards. This Commission's actions as regards Mr. Long's proposal does not meet those minimum standards of fairness, and I urge you to consider only the Charter Review Committee's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Beatrice McKenzie, who will be followed by Morgan Monroe. Is Beatrice McKenzie here? No. Then we will move on to Morgan Monroe, who will be followed by Charles C. Kaler.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's lovely to see you. Also, thank you for our wonderful staff and all the work you do in the county. I want to really encourage the Commissioners to consider moving the recommendations from the Charter Review Committee to the ballot for the voters to decide. These recommendations would bring our charter into alignment with current practices in the county. They would reduce confusion, and they would protect against partisan activities. I wonder why the Commissioners are so drawn to Mr. Long's last-minute end run around our committee. Lane County cares about democracy, and we all agree that partisan gerrymandering is not anything we'd want in our community. The charter review proposals reduce partisan potential within our commissioner districts and our redistricting process. The Charter Review Committee's proposals would improve the process and would continue to reduce partisan potential. When we were looking at options, we had folks come in and say, well, if you did this, it would benefit this group, and if you did this, it would benefit this group. You'll notice our recommendations are incredibly short. Our recommendations reduce confusion, and our recommendations help clarify things so that the county is not at risk for significant future lawsuits and wasted resources that I think would likely result from Mr. Long's end run around our committee. Our committee worked hard also to ensure that our recommendations were in line with state and federal law. It's really important because if we put pieces into our charter that in our opposition to state and federal law, we don't get to just defy those. We have to follow them in addition to our charter. And that is that very space where we run the risk of increasing the potential for significant, expensive lawsuits against our county because of how Mr. Long's proposals are written. One of the things that Steve Kornacki and I were continually, entertainingly on the same side about through this process was what belongs in the charter and what belongs in code. The vast majority of Mr. Long's proposal, if you support it, belongs in code, not in the charter. I'm really concerned that his end run around our committee will open the county again to serious lawsuits, will waste vital resources that we don't have to waste in partisan redistricting, yet again on a whim, instead of because of census data, and would enshrine into our charter items that will not stand the test of time. And our charter and our community deserve a charter that stands the test of time. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Charles C. Kaler, who will be followed by Ty Preuss Zimmerman.
Good morning, Chair Trieger and Commissioners. I'm Charles C. Kaler, Vice President and speaking for the League of Women Voters of Lane County, in lieu of our President, Terry Parker, who is on her sailing the Northeast Pacific. The League of Women Voters of Lane County restates its support of the county charter amendments recommended by the Charter Review Committee. Specifically, these include the section that revises the title and description of commissioner districts following the May 7th board discussion. The League acknowledges there should be some distinction in the description of the two Eugene area districts. The two districts should not be described identically. The two sections that revise the districting process and establish an independent redistricting committee in the charter. The League of Women Voters of the United States, of Oregon, and of Lane County are committed to redistricting processes where the people, not the politicians, make redistricting decisions. Commission decisions on redistricting and charter changes should, of course, be made with transparency and continuous opportunity for public engagement, particularly because those decisions just once a decade. The League also supports the Charter Review Committee's recommendation to repeal Sections 33, 34, 35. No purpose is served by retaining obsolete language in modern charter. Should the Commission move forward to refer these charter amendments to the voters, the League will be ready to include unbiased information about the proposed changes through its voter service activities. We have followed and respect the thoughtful work of the Lane Charter Review Committee. Thank you for your time and service. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Ty Preuss Zimmerman, who will be followed by Gabriel Guidero.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I am Ty Bruce Zimmerman. I live in Bethel. I'm a few minutes walk away from Commissioner Farr, and thank you to the work of the 2021 Redistricting Committee. I am now also in Commissioner Farr's district. And I want to note that those current maps that we have, in addition to making my own location make infinitely more sense than when I was somehow folded into West Lane, also gives us the board we have today, which has 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and an independent on it, and is very nicely balanced right now. So I see very little reason to consider redrawing those districts ahead of schedule. So of all the things that I saw in this proposal that from the long memo, which I've read a couple times now, even though I only first saw it on Monday, of all the things in there that confuse me the most is why we would begin the process in 2025. I don't see any reason to hurry it along, even if there are pieces of this proposal that you like. And I do appreciate the intent, the idea of reviewing the process of how our independent redistricting committee works and trying to increase independence. I'm in favor of trying to find measures and exploring that possibility. I don't feel like what I've read here is quite there yet. I think this needs more work. There were several pieces that threw me off. One is the amendment that names a very specific border between the North and South Eugene districts, which feels entirely contradictory to legislative finding 1 in the proposal, which is that commissioners should not choose their voters. I don't understand how those 2 pieces connect of here's a proposal to create an independent committee so that the commissioners themselves aren't making the choice of districts anymore, but these districts have to be separated right here. In addition to that piece, there was also parts of how the committee is selected where the intent made sense. We're looking to keep people that have deep partisan interests out and include people that are more independent, but I don't know that that as written, it fully captures that. It blocks out elected officials if they receive compensation, but it would, for example, allow someone on a school board or in a fire district to still participate as written. However, it blocks out people that have worked on campaigns regardless of whether that candidate receives compensation. So, for example, I volunteered on a friend's school board campaign. That is the only campaign I have ever worked for. And the way I read this, that made me ineligible for the charter committee, but he, as an elected official, having won that race, is still eligible. So that's a piece that I think could be cleaned up dramatically, and there's a whole lot of those. So if you do support the ideas in here, I think there's room to explore them further, but I would think they need to go through a charter review process, go to the next charter review committee, and again, we have time to do that and look at this in more detail because 2025 is a completely unnecessary deadline for the next redraw.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Gabrielle Guidero, who will be followed by Isaac Judd.
Good morning. My name is Gabriela Guidero, and I live east of Springfield. And I would like to urge you to not move the charter amendments to the ballot. It's expensive, not necessary, and doesn't contain anything imminent. At a time when budgets are tight, it seems irresponsible to spend that much money putting something towards the ballot. Now, I understand you have respect for the committee members that you've appointed, though I would like to point out that they include political consultants and those who have given greatly financially to some of the commissioners. I'd also like to point out that the district names are incredibly important. They give voice to groups that feel a unified sense of community. Sorry, too early in the morning. That taking that away allows pieces of districts to get put into others, like the South Eugene district being roped into several other commissioner districts. And with those names, people have a harder time accepting that. Without the names, it's an easier pill to swallow and allows especially rural voters to be disenfranchised by voters in Eugene. and being part of the county, that shouldn't happen. To conclude, I'd like to just urge you, please don't move this on. Don't spend the money. I know you have respect for your committee, but just because they put the time and energy into it doesn't require it to go to the ballot.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Isaac Judd, who will be followed by Claire Syret.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm going to be mercifully brief here. I'm just going to say I really encourage us to honor the committee's work that they went through in that process. It's a long process for people to go through, and I think it's really important that we honor that process and look at those recommendations only. And the outside things coming through in a separate process just doesn't seem to honor the spirit of transparency that we're looking to encourage in Lane County. So I just ask you to look at the committee's work and move those forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Claire Syret, who will be followed by Beverly Barr.
My name is Claire Syret. Good morning, Chair Trieger and Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm here to speak in support of this board standing by the transparent and citizen-informed recommendations put forward by the Charter Review Committee for simple and practical charter amendments rather than putting forward a set of radical and unvetted suggestions made by a single private citizen in the 11th hour. The Charter Review Committee was convened in good faith by this body and has done the work requested. To throw over this committee's recommendations, which build upon those found in the 2021 Independent Redistricting Committee report in favor of a set of recommendations that have not been subject to similar public scrutiny, is not good governance and will undermine the voters' trust in both this body and the process going forward. If Mr. Long, the author of the unvetted set of proposals, believes his recommendations are superior, he should have brought them forward in the course of the Charter Review's work and allowed them to be discussed through that public process. That would have represented the kind of transparency that is good governance. I understand that there was a legal review of Mr. Long's proposal, but that review has not been released to the public. This is concerning and raises red flags. Redistricting is a complex and complicated process that should allow for those with relevant experience to participate. Under the Long proposal, qualified individuals, including people of color and those with local governance experience, would be excluded, leaving out voices that could provide critical perspective when most needed. This is a radical proposal that does not serve our community interest and should not be substituted for a set of recommendations that have been thoroughly analyzed and thoughtfully considered. I call upon this board, and in particular my county commissioner, Commissioner Farr, to honor the transparent and thoughtful process this board initiated with the Charter Review and move those recommendations forward to the public for a vote. This is what good governance looks like. This is what builds trust with voters. And this is what will serve the interests of this community. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Beverly Barr, who will be followed by Nora Morgan.
Good morning, everybody, and commissioners and staff and public. I'm Beverly Barr. I've been a citizen of Lane County since 1991, living in the River Road neighborhood of Eugene. I'm here. Many people have already said all of these things better than I will, but I'll go through my notes really quickly here. I'm here to urge you to approve the referral to the voters of the work of the six amendments of the Charter Review Committee. The CRC worked for months on this, clearly identified some needed amendments, very concisely written, and very clear and understandable as it's referred to the ballot for the voters to either approve or to not approve. It does need to, anything revision to the charter has to be approved by voters. I'm also here to urge you to set aside for now the harangue long letter that was dated May 23rd and sent to the commissioners. It's an in run, it's 11th hour thing, and as other people have said, it was not public process. So the content of that letter could be considered as public content because it's the work of one person who is not part of the CRC, and this work did not follow the proper processes of public participation. So you can't equate those two sets of amendments to the charter. It's not legitimate to do that. And if the process is not legitimate, it likely, if it passes, goes on through, it's going to result in lawsuits. And confusion for all the rest of the many districts in Lane County that have to go with the district boundaries. Since these, since the process isn't legitimate and it will result in lawsuits, it's going to cost a lot of taxpayer money. Now, conservatives in particular are supposed to be concerned about money, and I really urge you to think about how much this is going to cost. If you equate those two sets of amendments from the harangue long business versus your well-vetted Charter Review Committee. It's a sneaky way to try to redo the already approved redistricting work of the Independent Redistricting Committee that was based on the 2020 census. So I'm urging you to follow the rules of good government and remember what your legacy will be for voters from time to come. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Nora Morgan, who will be followed by David Fidenki.
My name is Nora Morgan, and everyone has said it so much better than me. I just want to say, please do what is best for the people of Lane County. Do your job. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is David Fidenki, and he will be followed by Jenny Jonak.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is David Fidenki, and I'm been a resident in the city of Eugene for almost 50 years. By September, it'll be 50. And I was a reporter for KZI TV when the 5 commissioner districts were originally set up by the commission. And I'm appearing today because I've got many concerns about the proposal that was put forward by Misters Gary and Long. One of the provisions of that proposal, I think, will create a lot of mischief, and it is the provision for removing members of the redistricting commission. It allows a petition by any resident of Lane County in circuit court to remove one or more members of the commission. I just think that's a very dangerous provision. If you were to move forward with any of Mr. Long and Mr. Gary's proposal to you, it needs a lot of close review before you would do that. After I gave up being a news reporter, I had a number of jobs, one of which I worked for the American Civil Liberties Union here in Oregon for 33 years. So I'm very familiar with the concept of one person, one vote. When a number of the criteria that are supposed to be used by the Commission in Mr. Long and Gary's proposal requires paying attention to the U.S. Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. I think we all know that both the Equal Protection provision of the U.S. Constitution and the Voting Rights Act have been severely weakened in recent years by the U.S. Supreme Court. That is not as much of a safeguard as it might have been in 1978 or 1982. And the next proposal in that section requires achieving population equality as nearly as practicable. As was said earlier, having a line at Roosevelt Boulevard does not conform to census tracts, which is the only way you can make the districts equal in population. Please do not move forward with that proposal at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Jenny Jonak, who will be followed by Julie Parker.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jenny Jonak, and I have served for over a year on the Lane County Charter Review Committee as its only BIPOC member. I have serious concerns about the Long proposal because it would create barriers for community members who are BIPOC, youth, or have disabilities. Instead of the Independent Redistricting Commission, which allows anyone living in Lane County to serve, Long's proposal would require members to, 1, be registered to vote, not just live in Lane County, 2, have been registered to vote for at least 3 years prior to applying, 3, have voted in 2 of the 3 most recent general elections, and 4, not be an employee or related to an employee of the county or many government offices for the past 4 years. The impact of these barriers is that we would be less likely to have committee members of color. In Oregon and across the nation, we know that white Americans vote at significantly higher rates than blacks, Latinos, Asians, and other voters of color. Disparities in voter turnout by race and ethnicity mean that a committee whose membership depends on your voting history guarantees that we are less likely to have members of color. We are also less likely to have members with disabilities because of difficulties and barriers with voting. The proposal also excludes immigrants by requiring that one be registered to vote and have voted for several years. This also reduces diversity because new citizens tend to be more diverse based on race, gender, sexuality, and other intersections of identity. The proposal excludes youth by requiring that one be registered to vote and have voted for several years. The proposal requires that a commission member not have received compensation for holding elective office, which questions whether privileged office holders can decline compensation to avoid disqualification, where lower income office holders who rely on compensation would not have that option. The Long proposal only focuses on geography for ensuring representation. Fair and independent redistricting is essential for making sure that our democracy operates fairly. By creating barriers for Black, Indigenous, BIPOC youth, and disabled voters, this would disenfranchise them. I urge each of you to remember in 2022, when the Lane County Commissioners promised that they would apply Lane County's equity lens to their work. That lens seeks to remove systemic barriers and promote inclusion. This proposal would create more barriers for our historically underserved and marginalized community members. It would disenfranchise the community members we promised to center in our decision-making. I ask each of you commissioners to center equity in your work and reject this proposal.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Julie Parker, who will be followed by Tim Morris.
Good morning. My name is Julie Parker. I live in South Eugene after having lived in Cottage Grove for 18 years. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. Also appreciate the fact that public comment has been extended till July 9th, which is my understanding. I won't rehash through the many good comments made so far, especially those on transparency, which our county government should be based upon. I am, of course, as many of us here are, here to oppose the Stan Long letter, the proposal. I don't understand why now this has come up, and, you know, in addition to the transparency, it seems to me that if we're going to jump ahead of the process, there should be a really good reason, like a pandemic or something like that, but here it has just popped up. And I do not understand the justification. I've done some reading on this and I cannot find it. The other thing the last thing I'll focus on, which has been mentioned before, is the financial aspects of this. Morgan Monroe commented on and another speaker on the legal challenges, which would be imminent, in my opinion. And furthermore, the cost of redrawing the maps, would be expensive. The commissioners are have a fiduciary obligation to spend the money of the county wisely. It is our tax dollars at work, so please take that into account as you make this decision. And if you're going to incur additional expenses, please make sure they are important and merited, and I do not see that here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Tim Morris, who will be followed by Carl Eisenbach.
Good morning. This is my first public testimony without coffee, so I will try my best. Chair Trieger, Vice Chair Lovell, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. For the record, my name is Timothy Morris. I live in District 3. I will be brief. The Heron Long proposal for charter amendments is disastrous to public trust and our democracy. If memory serves, your first public comment about redistricting was December 3rd, 2020. Where was Mr. Long then? Why has it taken nearly 4 years for him to provide public comment? Your public process brought out an independent review committee made up of 15 residents with a very long resume of knowledge and expertise. Nearly 4 years of discussion with experts and community members holds absolutely no candle to a private map drawn by an unknown amount of people submitted at the last minute. Rushing or altering the process of redistricting without any sound justification will compromise our community's trust in this body. It will subvert the will of the voters, and it will bring harm to our entire county. Democracy will not die in darkness. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Carl Eisenbach, and that will conclude the in-person public testimony, and then we'll move to online, where I understand we have 11 people signed up.
I am Carl Eisenbach from the South Eugene District. I saw a report in the Register Guard about Health and Human Services losing $13.5 million in funds, a 22% reduction, loss of 9.5 FTE, and a $4 million reduction in homeless services. To me, this is kind of like buggering thy neighbor, because I can appreciate the fiscal difficulties that the county is having, as other governments are having. But this reduction of money, $4 million for homeless services, really pushes an excessive burden onto both the cities of Eugene and Springfield in terms of increased costs for them for dealing with the homeless situation. So, for example, I can anticipate that your budget reduction is going to lead to a substantial increase in the homeless population in the two cities. I can appreciate that it's going to increase the costs of police services, other services like fire, particularly cahoots on the city governments.
Excuse me, just one moment, sir. Tanya, can you pause the clock for a moment? I just want to check with County Council. Generally in public hearings, and it is noticed on the sign-in that this is a single item topic public hearing, it's not an ordinance before us, so it's not quite as formal as to not taking testimony outside of the topic. But is there any reason, I'm asking our Office of County Council to flag for us if there's any reason not to allow Mr. Eisenbach to conclude, and or whether we need to give any such parameters to anyone who's yet to testify this morning online?
Well, I agree that it's not as strict as it would be otherwise if we were discussing an ordinance, discussing an order, of course, proposed order today. So, from what I've heard so far, from what I've heard so far, Chair, I haven't heard anything that I felt crossed the line.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Please continue. Sorry for the interruption.
I apologize for being a deviant. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that jail, police, cahoots is all going to increase substantially, and that will boomerang actually in terms of the county expenses that you have in regard of the jail. It's kind of a penny wise and pound foolish approach. And it seems to me that given the circumstances that you're in, I would really urge you to get creative. I think you need to put pressure on Salem. I think you need to put pressure on our elected officials in Washington, D.C. to come up with additional revenues that can fill the gap for your HHS needs. It's really unfortunate that, we're in this kind of situation. And I can't believe how much suffering there is on the streets every day in terms of the homeless situation, and the budget reductions are just going to make things substantially worse. So I urge you to be as creative in your fundraising as you can possibly be. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment and your patience with our process. That concludes the in-person public comment list, so I will turn it over to Tanya to manage the queue for those giving comment online this morning.
Thank you, Chair. You are online and would like to give public comment this morning. Can you please raise your virtual hand, and I will call on you and ask if you would like to be on camera. All right. John Q. Murray, I've asked you to unmute. Would you like to be on camera?
Sure.
All right, just one moment. You will be promoted to panelist. You'll need to accept that. And now you can go ahead and show your camera.
Let's see, where's my camera? There we go.
There you go. All right, you may begin your public comment.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, staff, and Charter Review Committee members. For the record, John Quetzalcoatl Murray, Executive Director of the Corporation for Public Community Newspapers. We're a local news nonprofit here in the Upper Willamette watershed part of Lane County. We support local news, an essential institution for democracy in so many ways. It's part of our larger mission, sustaining democracy and self-governance. That's also our goal in speaking today about the titles and descriptions of commissioner districts. We ask that you adopt an idea from John Wesley Powell. He mapped the Grand Canyon. He was the second director of the U.S. Geological Survey. He recognized the importance of water in the West, and he recommended one small adjustment to our American institutions. In 1889, at Montana's Constitutional Convention, he proposed that administrative districts be based on watersheds. Quote, I want to present to you what I believe to be ultimately the political system which you have got to adopt in this country, and which the United States will be compelled sooner or later, ultimately, to recognize. Powell said, I believe that the primary unit of organization should be the drainage basin, which would practically have a county organization. Montana did not adopt Powell's idea, but it has stood the test of time, and now its time has come. We are facing mega wildfire, mega drought, mega conflict over water resources, and our institutions for managing water resources are faltering. We encourage you to adopt titles and descriptions for Lane County Commissioner districts that lists the names of the watersheds within those districts. Such a charter amendment will promote greater watershed awareness, a holistic approach to soil and water quality, air quality, habitat improvement, fish and wildlife, and public health. It will better position our descendants to respond to disruptive climate change. We've also submitted several maps showing how Lane County might also start discussions with our neighbors to snap Lane County to watershed boundaries. This is already done on the east and mostly done on the south. By aligning our administrative districts, as John Wesley Powell suggested, to increase awareness of our most precious natural resource, and by preserving affordable access to clean and healthy water for all, we can help preserve democracy in America. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I'm looking at the next name. Tiffany Monroe, I've allowed you to speak. Would you like to be on camera?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to promote to panelist. And now you can go ahead and share your computer video. Perfect. And you may begin your public comment.
Thank you, Chair Trieger, Lane County Board of Commissioner members. My name is Tiffany Monroe, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of Lane Families for Farms and Forests. We're an organization that supports the rich heritage of ag and forestry, two cornerstones of Lane County in our local community. We'd like to draw attention to the recommendation of revising the redistricting process and establishing an independent redistricting process. In 2021, Lane Families for Farms and Forests commented on this, and we appreciate the opportunity to engage this time around. Recently, the Board of Commissioners received 6 proposals, recommendations by the Charter Review Committee, and 2 that were proposed by Commissioner Ryan Senega. Due to the lack of public input in the proposal generation process, we would like to express appreciation to Commissioner Senega for providing additional amendments to be considered that allow for additional public input on this matter. We will add that the citizens redistricting recommendation submitted by Stan Long was not randomly developed. It is based upon a proposal by people, not politicians, in response to the state of Oregon receiving an F by the Princeton Review on our redistricting process around the state. This method was supported by Chambers of Commerce, League of Women Voters, and the Eugene Springfield NAACP, a broad array of folks that don't always typically align, that seek this process that is based upon people, not politicians, that was submitted recently, is something that people want to see. And so we would like for you to consider that. But most importantly, Lane Families for Farms and Forests supports the forming of an independent redistricting process that holds true to the intention of being separate and independent from elected officials, preventing them from securing future elections. We are particularly concerned about the recommendations made by the Charter Review Committee as it incorporates process and mechanisms to allow elected officials to control outcomes. These include being listed in the Lane Code, which can change at any time, the selection process of members, as well as the appointment process, and the commissioners eventually selecting the final maps. This all is a biased process that allows county commissioners to control. We would ask for you to protect the voice and desires of the people of Lane County. We kindly request that you seek an ethical redistricting process that limits elected officials' control, creates equal representation of districts, and screens for conflicts of interest. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide comments, and we really appreciate all of your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. Jeremy Shearer, I've asked you to unmute. Would you like to be on camera?
No, thank you.
All right, then you can go ahead and begin your public comment.
Good morning, Chair Trigger, Vice Lovell, and Commissioners. My name is Jeremy Shearer, and I served on the Charter Review Committee. I'm very thankful for that opportunity and the opportunity to work with the committee, county staff, and also Committee Chair Monroe, and for allowing all opinions to be heard, including the minor opinions. I'm responding to the proposed charter amendments, particularly the redistricting committee process. I'm not really here to discuss the merits of the proposals, but step back and look at the big picture. John Adams is once quoted as saying, "We ought to consider what is the end of government before we determine which is the best form." Home rule is how we are constituted. It is a progressive document. Amending the charter is changing its form. In the discussions about amending the charter, we have not asked the primary question: how should we be governed? As far as I know, we haven't had this discussion. This debate will make more sense once we agree on the desired ends. Knowing the ends will help us determine whether to keep the status quo or to change our form or structure. There are three questions I'd like us to consider in this policy debate. Is there a problem? What is the harm? Is the structural policy change necessary? Finally, will the change solve the problem? In other words, does the help help? What if we amend our charter with one of these proposals, choose one, and it turns out to be a disaster? Who will be responsible for those problems? The public? The commissioners? Certainly not the committee. District lines are political lines and should be determined through a transparent political process with public debate and accountability. A charter amendment is inflexible, and to change it would be long and tedious. Keeping the status quo is flexible because it can be changed, and we can hold our elected officials accountable to their decisions. Establishing political lines is messy, challenging, and sometimes confusing, but that doesn't constitute a harm. Without a clear mandate, it's hard to find a harm in the status quo. Even if there is a harm, the untested cure could be worse than the disease. There's no reason to change the status quo without more thought towards the ends and more public debate. I recommend the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Stacy Holt, I have asked you to unmute. Would you like to be on camera?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to promote you to panelist. You'll have to accept that. Did you receive that request? There you go. Now you can go ahead and show your camera.
Oh, here we go. Hang on. Please pause. There we go. Thank you.
You may begin your public comment.
Okay. Good morning, commissioners. For the record, my name is Stacy Holt. I am a counselor from Crestwell, but I am speaking on my own behalf today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I testified to this board in 2021 about the corruption in our independent district redistricting committee at that time. The committee had a political consultant who drew maps that were beneficial to his prior client. This was wrong then, and I wonder why this body wants the public to approve their process in 2021. Voters are smart. They will learn more about the process and vote the CRC approval down. Nearly all voters believe there is corruption throughout our government. These kinds of actions only add to these perceptions. Suppose we are ever to evolve and improve our government processes. In that case, we must put strict conflict of interest checks on committees like these, or at the very least, elected officials like yourself, who just need to do the work and be transparent about your intentions. The removal of the district names is not just a procedural change, it's a potential gateway to gerrymandering. If the districts have no names, they can be shaped to serve specific interests. Furthermore, the proposal not only removes the names, but also loosens the descriptions of the districts, making it an even easier to manipulate situation. Though not highlighted in the board material, this aspect is crucial, and I quote, but also including contiguous portions of the county is necessary to comply with subsection D, end quote. The last IRC produced commissioner districts the last IRC produced commissioner districts where all commissioners could be elected from the city of Eugene. And these two charter amendments would open the door for more of this. For those reasons, I am opposed to the Charter Review Committee amendments. As stewards of Lane County, I encourage you to think carefully about how you are spending our money and how you are representing us. Too often in recent years, I've seen this body vote against the majority opinion of public comments. I am hoping to see that change now and going forward. In closing, I want to thank you for your service to Lane County and thank you for listening today.
Thank you for your public comments. William Gary, I have allowed you to speak. Would you like to be on camera?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Did you say yes?
I said yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to promote you to panelist. And now you can go ahead and show your camera.
Okay.
And you may begin your public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. I'm William Gary. I'm a shareholder at Harang Long, and I represent Stanton F. Long. On May 21st, I wrote to the Board of County Commissioners and to Lane County Council on behalf of Mr. Long, proposing that the board refer to the voters two separate charter amendments. The first was the creation of a 15-member nonpartisan redistricting commission to draw the boundaries for the 5 county commission districts. The second rewrote the current language concerning the description of the districts. These were separate measures in compliance with the separate vote requirement because some people might favor one measure but oppose the other. And I note that a lot of the comments this morning have been addressed to the one shorter measure that has been mentioned quite frequently. The proposal for an independent redistricting commission is not unique and it's not new. It is, in fact, consistent with a proposal made by the League of Women Voters in February of 2019, and it is substantially similar to a current proposed state measure, Initiative Petition 14, which is supported by a broad coalition of good government organizations, including the League of Women Voters. Thank you for agreeing to consider this proposal and to receive public comment concerning it. I understand, however, that County Council has raised concerns about the legality of the measure in a secret memorandum that Council has received from that the Commission has received from Council, but not with me or the public generally, because of the attorney-client privilege. This hardly seems like a fair process. I would respectfully request that I be given an opportunity to address County Council's concern. To do so, I need to know what they are. Mr. Long and I have been involved in redistricting debate for years. If there are issues with the measure as drafted, and it's a complicated measure, we would like to work with County Council as we have in the past to resolve those issues. Please release County Council's advice and give us the opportunity to address it. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Lori Siegel-Vacher, I've asked you to unmute. Would you like to be on camera, Lori?
It's not necessary.
All right, I'll reset the clock now, and you begin your public comment.
Today, my name is Lori Siegel. Today I'm speaking on behalf of Landmarch Lane County, who is in support of the Charter Review Committee's proposal. We believe that amending the charter and redistricting should both be processes in which the county residents, rather than elected politicians, make redistricting decisions. Redistricting and amending the charter should be done with transparency, as others have said, and should provide ample opportunity for public participation. We believe that the Charter Review Committee provided a transparent process with ample opportunity for public participation. After more than a year of meetings and public process by the committee, it was disheartening to see that with no more than a head nod from 3 commissioners, staff was directed to elevate a separate proposal from a local attorney. That is, not as one of what was likely to be several comments from the public, but rather as if it had come from the county itself. As been alluded to and brought up previously by others, there certainly are legal issues with Mr. Long's proposal. Doing a mid-decennial redistricting, which by the way does not come along with a visual diagram, no map of these new baseline from which the new committee would be starting as proposed by Mr. Long. Doing so would certainly make the charter itself internally inconsistent. That would be one legal concern that the county must certainly know about, and that Mr. Long and his attorney must certainly understand. Secondly, there hasn't been any problem described that would require establishing a new baseline suggested by one person for the commissioner districts. I didn't hear one articulated by Mr. Long's attorney this morning, and I haven't seen one in the record. The citizens of Lane County deserve better than a special interest approach to charter amendments and redistricting, and Land Watch requests that you support the redistricting committee's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. James Babson, I've asked you to unmute. Good morning. Would you like to be on camera?
No, thank you.
All right, let me reset the clock and you may begin your public comment.
This is Jim Babson of Lowell. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I'd like to again remind everyone listening of the events surrounding the redistricting process of 2011. In conjunction with the 10-year U.S. Census, the redistricting task force at the time did what was required of them and presented the board with several redistricting maps for their consideration. In the 11th hour, then Commissioner Bozovich introduced his own map, which strategically moved the Whitaker neighborhood from North Eugene into South Eugene. This map was then adopted by Commissioner Bozovich and his allies on the board. Not only was this a blatant and obvious gerrymander, but it was a real slap in the face to the redistricting committee, having all their hard work ignored. It makes you wonder why anyone would put in all the time and effort to serve on a citizens advisory committee when all their hard work might be completely disregarded by the commissioners. I hope the current board doesn't disrespect the Charter Review Committee in the same way by bypassing their recommendations in favor of some politically motivated alternative charter amendments. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. Cheryl Crumbly, I've asked you to unmute. Hi, Cheryl, would you like to be on camera?
Not necessary.
All right, let me reset the clock and
hello.
Your public comment.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Cheryl Crumbly. I'm a 35-year resident of North Eugene. I live in the River Road District. My comments today are directed primarily to my commissioner, Pat Farr. Commissioner Farr, you and I have crossed paths many times through the years, and I know your reputation is very important to you. Therefore, I'm disappointed and actually rarely concerned that you are now involved in a clearly last-minute deal to allow a redistricting proposal to proceed outside the established, transparent review process. The term used several times during today's public hearing is gerrymandering, which is described as manipulating the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one party or class. Why, oh why, Commissioner, would you involve yourself in this? Please, I urge you Commissioner Farr, to support the redistricting plan that has been vetted and approved by the 15-member Independent Redistricting Committee. And as the previous speaker mentioned, it's going to be harder and harder to get citizens to participate when they see that their efforts are just going to be overridden. So please, Commissioner Farr, please do not involve yourself in anything but legal, transparent, and above-board political dealings. Please don't violate the trust of your constituents and future voters. Your reputation could be permanently scarred and maybe even destroyed if you are not able to participate in a way that we've hired you to do. So please back away from this effort to manipulate voter districts and allow the citizens' work to go forward to the citizens for a vote. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for your public comment. Jennifer Wagner, I've asked you to unmute. And would you like to be on camera?
Yes, please.
All right, I'm going to send you a promotion to panelist. You'll need to accept that. There you go, and now you can show your camera.
Here we are. Are you ready?
Are you showing your camera?
Let's see. Oh, here we go.
There you go. All right. And you may begin your public comment.
Good morning, Lane County Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jennifer Wagner, and I live on the North Fork, which is just outside of Florence. I first briefly just wanted to mention how important I think it is for the county commissioner districts to remain with names on them. As a West Lane County Commissioner resident, our community of interest is very important to us, and we think it's important that that continue to be maintained, and accountability is in place with an actual label on it. It's also a lot easier to send constituents to their appropriate commissioner for assistance or conversations if the label is on there and they know exactly where to go. But I am actually here predominantly to testify about the possible charter amendment, these other possible charter amendments, specifically on the Independent Redistricting Committee amendment proposed by the Charter Review Committee. I served on the 2021 Independent Redistricting Committee, which is what this amendment is obviously modeled after. My experience of this amendment in practice wasn't independent, but it was full of partisan political actors and was highly controversial. There are better ways to conduct truly independent redistricting. Let me explain. First, the membership. The setup and process of this committee were similar to other committees that government bodies set up. 5 handpicked appointees from the commissioners, and then those 5 appointees selected 10 more members. So right from the start, the commissioners select a majority of the members or individuals to serve. Next, checking the interest. The committee members had a minimal review of potential conflicts of interest. We were required to fill out an application in a form that disclosed any financial conflicts to serving on the committee, but that was it. There were no guidelines on who shouldn't or should or could participate if we wanted a truly independent committee. For those who participated, several questionable aspects of the participants' history and relationships to the county would question their impartiality of independence. Here's some examples. Multiple people had received financial benefits from a county commissioner or their campaign within the previous 5 years. There were county employees. There were current and previously elected officials, lobbyists, local political contributors, and a married couple. Virtually everyone on the committee had some political history. And this includes myself. I've worked on political campaigns for many years, but more recently have been more involved with our family business. I'd like to point out as well that I believe that under the 2021 IRC setup, a direct family member of a commissioner could have participated. Next, the final say. Finally, after all the maps were drawn, the IRC voted on maps to forward to the Board of Commissioners. Again, this was not independent of the elected commissioners. Recommendations? This process needed to be more random to ensure commissioners could not select the people they wanted. We need to add.
Thank you for your public comment. And our last person is Deborah Higby. I have allowed you to talk. Would you like to be on camera?
Yes.
All right. You will receive a request to promote to panelist. And go ahead and show your camera.
Could I be muted? I mean, could I not have the camera?
Oh, sure. You can go ahead and just give public comment. Yeah. Would you like to do that now?
Let's see, just a second. I will have camera. Sorry,
That's okay.
A little bit. Okay. My name is Deborah Higby, and I live in District 1 in the River Road area. I have concerns regarding the proposed last-minute changes, as most people here have testified. The last-minute plan has received none of the public attention, review, and scrutiny that is needed and that's warranted given such potentially far-reaching changes. The changes have not been subjected to a formal analysis, and further, the proposal would make changes that can potentially influence who gets elected to the county commission. I further oppose the proposal to reset the redistricting committee for 2025. This proposal undermines our democracy and the independent redistricting process established in 2021. Finally, the amendments were motioned through without consulting the Charter Review Committee. If the last-minute changes are allowed, please provide an explanation whether the allegation is true that this will allow gerrymandering, which favors one party over another. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Yeah, that does conclude everyone's hands from online, so I will return the meeting to you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you again to everyone who weighed in online, who came in person. This is so important and really appreciate everyone's time and patience. I'm going to pause us for a moment just to do a process check with our staff about our one other item of business. We do have an estimated 75-minute work session item. I don't know if commissioners would prefer to, a couple of options we might have to give a little bit of comment or reflection, knowing that we will have this item back on our agenda on the 9th. I don't know whether Metro's available to go beyond noon, so that's one of our things that we need, whether our planning staff can condense their work session if Metro can't go beyond noon. So I think we just have a couple of process issues to work out before we know what we need to do next. Tim, up in the booth, do you know, are you able to go beyond noon if we run over today? No, they are not. They have another commitment. So we have a hard stop at noon with Metro.
Chair, I'd recommend give Commissioner 3 minutes just the way.
Yeah, so thank you for that suggestion. And Amber's saying, yes, you could condense the work session if need be, or we can split it into two and carry it forward and do another agenda. Thank you for that. Well then, yes, I propose we do one round of 3 minutes max per commissioner. I see Commissioner Buck is in the queue already, and I want to let folks who are still watching and still in the room know that I've also asked staff to get back to us before we conclude this item to see if we can name a time yet on the July 9th agenda for follow-up item. We typically build those sort of starting now, but we don't solidify them till a week ahead. So we'll do our best to get a time so folks know what to expect next. Thank you. Thanks again for that suggestion, Commissioner Farr. And with that, I will call on Commissioner Buck first and I'll just keep us a time.
Thank you, Chair. I want to, of course, thank everybody who came to speak today, both in person and online. I certainly am listening to all sides of the story and carefully consider everybody's comments and appreciate the time you took. I did also hear that there were some people who wish they could speak today but were unable. They did hear that we were having some time set aside on July 9th. And we're hoping that they could speak then or continue to write in, which I know that they can continue to do that regardless. But I would suggest to my colleagues that we extend the public hearing to the July 9th date so that more people can come and speak if they would like. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Who would like to be next in the queue?
I would ask,
Commissioner Seneca.
I would ask staff, do we have time set aside on the 9th? I mean,
That's
I know
what
it's
I'm working on that, and I'll announce it before we conclude the item, yes. Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, I'll continue. So I heard some questions about, this is actually for Mr. Thiel, the attorney-client privileged letter that you had some concerns about. And that attorney-client privilege, we can waive right here at the Commissioner Board, right?
It's the collective privilege of the board.
Yeah. So, Commissioner Buck, you brought it up last time, that we had concerns with it, and I did too. And I think in, full transparency, we should see if we can waive that attorney-client privilege for the said letter.
So Commissioner, are you asking right now to ask this board if they would like to vote to waive the privilege, or are you?
Correct. Yeah, I'm using my 3 minutes for that.
Does it require a motion?
It's probably a
Yes, it would require
a motion, but not an order. Yep. So.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to waive the attorney-client privilege for said letter that Mr. Thiel sent out to us about the Herring and Long letter.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Seneca and seconded by Commissioner Lovall to vote to waive the attorney-client privileged memo that was asked for by our Office of County Counsel regarding the charter amendment proposals from Stan Long delivered via William Gary. Does this, does this just require a simple majority to waive, or would it, or perhaps this is a procedural item that we should?
Yes, it would require a majority, a simple majority. And Mr. Rickoff was briefly, we were discussing just that it would probably be good to make it clear if you guys do choose to waive that it be specific as to how narrow that waiver is going to be and how targeted toward this particular subject or the content of the specific advice that you had received.
So would it be fair and workable for you, and also for the maker of the motion, to have you quickly craft the recommended motion you would like to see made, and then ask the Commissioner if he'd like to restate the motion to ensure that we're...
Well, I certainly can if the board asks me to, but again, I don't know that it needs to be too in-depth, but just simply stating that it's narrowed or focused solely on the advice that it's already been given in written form as to specifically to the proposal received from Herring Long.
To the motion, Chair.
Commissioner Farr.
I'm not prepared to support this motion. We've not had adequate time to discuss it. If it were brought up again at a later date with discussion, I may change my vote on that, but at this point in time, I'm not prepared to support this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Seneca, would you like your motion to stand for a vote? Would you like to?
Yeah.
All right. And can you clarify the language of your motion to be in line with what Office of County Counsel is recommending?
Yeah, well, it's for the letter that Mr. Thiel sent to us about the Herring and Long concerns. That is attorney-client privilege, that attorney-client privilege to be waived for that letter, that particular letter.
Does that satisfy?
Yes, I believe that's sufficiently narrow.
Thank you. All right. Any other discussion? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Although I did bring this up at the last meeting today after listening to the public comment, it feels like the intent of this particular motion is so that people can specifically work directly with an attorney that proposed an alternative measures to elevate, and that is not the intent that I had originally last week. So at this point, I'm not in favor and will not vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. And I will just add also, I think this particular question and the timing of it, this is not the appropriate time. So if the maker of the motion would like to move forward with the vote, we can. If you'd like to withdraw the motion and bring it back at another time, that is an option.
That would require the second to agree.
Correct, it would, but I'm working through the process. It first requires the maker of the motion to withdraw.
At this point in time, I will withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does the person who seconded the motion, Vice Chair, agree to withdraw the motion? I do. Thank you. The motion has been withdrawn, and we will figure out when and if it is appropriate to bring it back, or any commissioner may do that at another time. And so, moving on, any other commissioners wishing to give any response, remonstrance regarding public comment? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was by far the longest public session we've had for comments, and I do so appreciate it. There's some really good, passionate responses, and I thank you for the time that you served. This is obviously a working morning for a lot of us here, so I appreciate you coming. I do want to press comments going forward is that this is a public hearing, and public means that all the public can weigh in. And so I'm hard pressed to try to differentiate what public can and can't show up at a public hearing in what form or fashion they decide to show up in. So I'm having a little difficulty wrapping my head around some of the angst about the quote-unquote last-minute proposal by the Long firm. So I do am weighing that, but I also hear your concerns about how you view each districts, how they should be named. I represent the Springfield district. We are a very diverse district of people of 60% Democratic voters, 30% or so Republican, and then, about 70, there's probably another big, large percentage of independents. So for us being tribal about that, it's not that nothing tribal, it's just about population. And I think as we go forward thinking about how we divide up districts, we need to remember that districts aren't designed to be divided up by an infantile percentage. The state law allows us a 10% leeway. So with a 75,000 population district, we have about 7,500 people, give or take, that can be looped into a district. So I think in all aspects of fairity, we should probably loosen our concern about how tight they are and more concerned about just how generally represented they are. Eugene, by population, has approximately 2.3 votes. Springfield has by population 0.8 votes. And so there is some sense to say, well, Springfield could have a third or 0.3 parts of Eugene in it, would make it fair, and then the east and west rural districts would be represented rurally. So, think about those kinds of things too. It's really good to bring our emotion out of a lot of things that we think about and bring facts in so we can make really good, transparent decisions. But again, thank you for your time and your efforts.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I prefer to not speak to a room. I prefer to speak to an individual. And since Cheryl Crumley spoke to me, I'll speak to you, Cheryl. I hope you're still listening. Every testimony that we heard today, both written and oral, is a part of the transparent public process that we're going through. It is a transparent public process, so everything, including written, including oral, is a part of that process. And that public testimony will continue until at the very least, July 9th. We've heard August 6th. It's kind of more of a deadline date for us, but we will continue hearing public testimony as long as the public is wanting to testify on this particular matter. The decisions that we make as an elected board, two of us were elected very recently. Two of this board were re-elected just recently. The decisions that we made, each one of us has 20% of that decision making, and we will consider all of the testimony. I know I will consider all of the testimony, both written and oral, and from the committee itself, as we move forward with these very important decisions. Decisions that's been pointed out will have long-term consequences. We need to take very careful deliberation as we go through this process. I'm going to consider all testimony given today and all subsequent testimony when I make my decision, ultimately, that I have been elected, most recently on May 21st of this year, to make. Now, I'm going to point something else out. A number of people, this guy over here is gone, I forget what his name was, talks about the conservative majority on this board. There's no majority on this board. Most of our votes are, more than 90%, probably closer to 95%, are 5-0. Now, occasionally there are 3-2 votes. Yes, there are. And always, I'm the third vote. More than half the time is me, Commissioner Trieger, and Commissioner Buck.
Other times, it's me, Commissioner Lovall, and Commissioner Seneca. There's no majority on this board. All decisions are made based upon deliberation, not by a preconceived notion of majority. So really, anybody who's got that on their mind, anybody who's worried about that, ease your minds. There's no majority on this board. Looking forward to more testimony on July 9th and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, I will just use my time to again appreciate everyone. I was keeping careful track, and one thing that I was really struck by was we really did have representation speaking today from all of our districts and from all points of view. And because we will spend more time on this item, I'll reserve comments for specifics that were raised, but I will just say the question before us is yes or no to refer any or all recommendations that have come to us to the voters who will ultimately decide. And the recommendations have come to us, some through very clear and thorough and vetted process, which was our committee, and some has come to us from the public, whether that is a letter from an attorney that one commissioner tried to advance to the same level as the committee and instead was folded in to general public comment, where it sits along with some other recommendations that we had in written and testimony today around considering watersheds as borders. We got written testimony considering term limits. We've received lots of recommendations for potential amendments to the charter. And so ultimately what this body is tasked with doing is deciding yes or no to refer anything to the voters, and if so, which things. And then we can have a debate about what was the process that got us there. And part of that, that will happen in subsequent meetings, not today. And I just want to also reflect on what Commissioner Farr said about whether there is a majority on this board. I think it's important to note that one thing we are all unified in is we're all here and we all ran because we want to do what's best for the county. We want to represent our districts, but that our decisions are on behalf of the entire county. Once upon a time, Lane County Commissioners weren't districted at all, and we didn't run in any district and made best decisions on behalf of the entirety of the county, both all the residents of the county, but also this county organization, this local government. So I just want to make sure we're all reminding ourselves and each other and holding that as we move forward. I'm just checking to see so I can let folks know if we've heard from staff about a time on July 9th.
Chair, I did see
it. Looks like maybe we could do a 9:30.
Yes.
We have a 9 a.m. time certain item that takes about half an hour already scheduled on the 9th. So we will put this second on our agenda, it sounds like, after an approximately 30-minute item. Does that sound right, Administrator? Yeah. Yes. So for those of you watching now or later on the recording, this will be on our July 9th agenda at the top of the item agenda after one other approximately 30-minute item, but we'll take signups for public comment, and agenda team will sort out how we split out that time, public comment, more staff presentation, perhaps more discussion from our Office of Legal Counsel, and we've already heard our county clerk will be here because there would be clear ramifications of putting things on the ballot, of changing districts, whether that's by name or by border, to our clerk. So we'll want to hear that because, again, one thing this board is unified in is we want our professional staff to weigh in and give us the best guidance they can, so we're making good decisions. So thank you.
Chair, I'd like to do my last 15 seconds right now.
Commissioner Farr.
That is to say that the decision to include all testimony in today's public hearing and subsequent public hearings was a 5-0 decision. There was no 3-head nod decision. It was a 5-0 decision.
Thank you, Commissioner. So with that, I will conclude this item by again thanking everyone who came, thanking our staff who walked us through this item, and more to come. Commissioner Buck.
I just want to be clear on process. Do we need a motion of any kind to move this forward to July 9th?
I think the original, thank you for the question, the original assignment was to hold today and July 9th for this item and to take public comment at both. And so I think we covered that with the previous assignment, and I'm looking is everybody agreeing that we're doing that? It looks like at least through. Yes. Thanks for checking, but I think we are well covered on that front. Thank you, everyone. So we do have one more item that was estimated at 75 minutes, and we've got 55 of those. So I will invite Land Management County Council and planning staff to the table to walk us through. This is a work session item only and not a decision item. And just real briefly check with the county administrator, will we need to leave any time for any county announcements?
I think I'll have one or two very quick items.
Okay, so maybe if we can keep this item to about 40 minutes, and if we need to carry it forward and do another brief session, we can do that, just so we're sure we leave time for administration announcements, any commissioner announcements or assignment requests. Thank you. Thank you for your patience and working on the fly here. Welcome. And Amber Bell, Planning Director, please introduce yourself and your panel for the record. And take us.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Amber Bell, Planning Director. I'm joined by County Council this morning. So this is an item, and I will work to be as quick as possible with my presentation and condense it as much as possible. I know that time is limited. I also do want to mention that one of our points that we were going to discuss today is that it might the board might find that it's of interest to schedule a third work session. So I think we talked about at the last work session that this is a conversation and we can continue that conversation. And so we'd be happy to set a third work session if time runs short. So this is a work session that's a continued discussion on type 2 and 3 land use appeal procedures and potential code amendment options. That you might recall that this originates from a board assignment that was made on July 18th, 2023, and we had a work session on January 23rd of this year. I wanted to just provide a really quick recap of what we talked about at the January 23rd work session. So we talked about an overview of type 2 and 3 procedures. We talked about the background of the Lane Code Chapter 14 code modernization work. That started in 2015. That was part of the code modernization project that is ongoing, and that project is focused on making the code more navigable and user-friendly, easier to and to simplify the code. There was 2 appeals and 2 remands of the Chapter 14 code modernization project. We talked about the topics that were at issue in those appeals, and that overall that process was about 5 years. We gave an overview of some prior work sessions from 2016 to 2018 in the packet that were related to discussing the fees for the former elective review procedure. The focus staff's understanding was the focus was with appeal trends and whether the fees were in line with actual costs of appeal processing. The appeal fee had been $250 for some time for board review, and then it was increased in 2018 to $950. And then in January of 2019, the board issued an assignment for staff to report back on the number of appeals since the fee increase, specifically 6 months of data. In February of 2019, there was an update on appeal trends following the increase of the fee. And then in April of 2019, the board had a work session where the board explored whether or not to eliminate the former elective board review procedure. And at the work session, there was different considerations taken into account. It's staff's understanding that that discussion covered that there were concerns with being able to meet timelines, with having an additional appeal process. There were efficiency concerns. Talked about the former procedure being resource intensive and there being impacts to operations, including permit processing, as that former procedure entailed all appeals coming before the board before they went up to Land Use Board of Appeals, and often they did go on to Land Use Board of Appeals. So then there was language that was drafted that was reviewed by the Planning Commission in May of 2019. It was modeled after another county's code, in part, and then that was discussed through the process, and then that was folded into the fall 2019 readoption of the Lane Code Chapter 14 process. And then I'll also note that those code amendments allowed for hearings official reconsideration as a separate appeal option. So it decoupled the hearings official reconsideration process to allow that to be a separate option. We talked about the current elective review procedure, which I'll go over again quickly in a moment. We talked about possible code amendments and considerations. Again, that was a start of a conversation. And then County Council talked about the deferential standard of review at LUBA and the role of the hearings official. We discussed having a part 2 work session with some more emphasis on options. So that we're here today to have that conversation. And staff understood that the interest of the board, or the board's interest, as expressed at the last work session, was kind of to look at a middle ground between the former procedure and the current procedure. So the former procedure provided that any party may file an appeal to the board at any time before, any time before a matter was appealed to LUBA. The board appeal was the first step. Appellants had the option of choosing the elect not to hear path for $950, or a path that would either entail hearings official reconsideration or board review, and the fee for that process was $3,712. If the higher fee was paid, the hearings official had the option to reconsider, and if they did, a partial refund was issued. If the board elected not to hear, similarly, there was a partial refund at that point. And in either option, the hearings official had the option to reconsider. The board made decisions on whether to hear the appeal on the record. Staff prepared an order and findings of fact. It was the recommendation, or if the recommendation was to not hear the matter, that was placed on the consent calendar. Otherwise, it was placed on the regular calendar. There were other options if specific criteria were met and the board elected to hear the matter, to allow limited additional testimony or to hold a de novo hearing subject to specific procedural requirements. Those requirements are the same as they are today. That code hasn't changed. And it was rare for the board, it's staff's observation and understanding that it was rare for the board to elect to hear the matter. There also in the former code, and this is in your packet, was a section Lane Code 14300, and that included a request for interpretation of county policy procedure that could be raised by the hearings official, and then allow the board to review an interpretation of an interpretation issue, and parties could participate on that interpretation. So the current procedure, coming out of that Chapter 14 update process and that history I already mentioned. So pursuant to 140805, the planning director can elevate hearings official decisions on type 2 appeal matters and type 3 applications to the board if certain criteria are met. The planning director provides notice to parties of record that the board review is being requested. That notice must be mailed before the end of the 12-day hearings official decision appeal period. The request can be for the board to either ratify and affirm the hearings official decision or to hold an on-the-record hearing if the hearings official decision if it meets certain criteria. And those criteria were adopted, again, with the Chapter 14 Code Modernization Project, and they really largely mirror the criteria that existed for decades. And I'm happy to go over more specifically what those criteria are, if helpful. And then if the board affirms the decision or decides to hear the appeal of a hearings official decision upon the planning director's request, the board does that through a board order. Staff prepares the packet and the order. If the order is to affirm, that's placed on the consent calendar, so similar to the prior process. And if it is to hear the appeal, then that would be on the regular calendar. The order sets out date of the hearing, the parties who may participate, the type of hearing, including whether any additional testimony will be allowed, again, based on criteria in the code. And then like the former procedure, there's criteria for when the de novo and additional testimony proceedings may occur. If an order is adopted by the board, another full packet is provided at that point, and notices are provided parties. That's all prepared by staff prior to the public hearing. And this process can take at least several weeks. And then also there's link code 16008. That does also allow for interpretation by the board to be requested. So then I wanted to go over some considerations that we've identified associated with the process. So there's a number of considerations, both pros and cons associated with a potential change of procedure. One is that, changing the procedure, that matters coming before the board, that can give the board opportunity to review Lane County adopted code policies if the decision involves interpretation. Board review addresses the issue of retaining deference before LUPA, the deferential standard of review. There was one instance when I was looking back through the few elect whether or not to hear procedures that came before the board under the old procedure where all items were coming before the board, where we were able to recommend an on-the-record hearing to correct inapplicable criteria that were applied in the hearing's official decision. So that's just one example. Other considerations are that really any additional time that's added to the land use process is critical because by state law, and that's implemented in Lane Code Chapter 14, there are very specific timelines that are mandated. So there's a specific amount of time, there's a specific deadline for issuing a type 2 or 3 decision. And that's 120 days within an urban growth boundary. So that's other than Eugene and Springfield, the cities within Lane County, like we issue land use permits for, those would be subject to 120 days. And outside of urban growth boundaries, there's a deadline of issuing a decision within 150 days. And there's limited exceptions to this, such as when an applicant provides a timeline extension, but those are largely out of the that's largely out of the county's control. By not meeting timelines, that can result in expenses paid by the county, such as reimbursement of application fees or paying the costs of a writ of mandamus proceeding, which is very expensive. I haven't talked about, there's some other timelines like for telecommunication towers that apply, but just focusing on the main timelines in state law. The appeal period, so the current procedure as well as our current procedure for bringing matters to the board, as well as other counties use a call-up procedure, which I'll talk about in a minute here. That requires that matters be elevated within a 12-day period. That period of time does provide some time constraints due to packet procedures and the time that it takes to prepare packets and scheduling logistics. We've talked before in the prior work session and also leading in work sessions with the board leading up to the Chapter 14 code updates that the process can be time intensive. It takes staff several hours at minimum to prepare the packets. That can impact operations, such as we're really working to bring down timelines of permits. And then just another consideration is that LMD is fee supported, and a question may arise about the need for appeal fee updates. And then the last consideration I wanted to mention is that when we're talking about type 2 and type 3 decisions and applications, those are they are subject to the quasi-judicial procedure. So that involves things like the need to disclose ex parte contact and bias, conflict of interest. Those must be avoided and handled appropriately. And so that's part of that process.
So could you say again which, did you name a chapter that was associated with that, or sorry, you just prefaced that, yeah, we're saying that again.
Thank you, yes. We have some language in Lane Code Chapter 14, and then there's also, there's a body of case law around procedural requirements.
Thank you, so that was just part of the Chapter 14 code modernization was, okay.
There's some language in Lane Code Chapter 14 regarding the quasi-judicial procedure.
Great, thank you. And while we're paused for a minute, I just want to, so we didn't introduce the whole panel, and not only do we have our Office of County Counsel, no longer the newest, but still relatively new and maybe one of the first or few times before us here in Harris Hall, our attorney Tiffany Johnson, and also just wanted to take this brief moment to pause and recognize and welcome our newest member of the team in the Office of County Counsel, Ann Davies. Thank you so much for being here. We're really glad to have you.
I might just take the pause to ask if there's any questions at this point. I apologize. I feel like I've been moving. Dove right in and started to move really quickly in the interest of time.
To the board. All right. Thanks. Just soaking it in. Keep going. Thank you.
So then we did some research into other counties' codes. As an example, we reviewed at least 10 other counties' codes. It wasn't a randomized sample, but we really tried to find a variety of counties, including adjacent counties and some of like our comparator counties that we look at for fee updates. We also looked at a couple on the coast, Tillamook and Clatsop. We looked at Lynn, Benton, Marion County, Deschutes, Jackson. So we tried to look at a variety of counties.
Did you say Tillamook?
Yes.
Right, good.
So in summary, we found that 4 of those 10 have some sort of what's called we're going to call it a call-up procedure. And those procedures vary. There's a few variations of that kind of procedure. So one example is when the board can consider any land use permit submitted as the initial review. So the board could call up a type 2 application, for example, and be the decision maker. So we understand that that's generally not a frequent process. The second version of this is that decisions are brought before the board during the appeal period, and then the board can determine whether or not to call up the application, or the decision rather, at that point. And then the third, and again, that's we heard that that is used fairly infrequently. And then the third is certain types of decisions can be appealed to the board, or certain procedure types. So, for example, if the decision is focused on interpretation of a local policy, or if the decision is for a type 3 procedure that involves more complex criteria or development impacts. A couple counties have a certain procedure type that is specific to code interpretations, and that code interpretations are called out as procedures that can be elevated to the board. One, we understand, originates with the hearings official making that decision, and then it can be appealed to the board. And another one starts with the planning director issuing the decision. Then of 3 or 4 researched, there are some decisions like planning commission decisions or type 3 decisions or conditional uses that can be appealed to the board. And then also there were a couple counties that leave their hearings official decision or planning commission decisions as final decisions. And that's for type 2s. And then also I have a little bit of information we found about the fees for these processes. If the board has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer that. And then we want to talk about potential options as we have identified after doing this research. So the packet talks about a number of options. I did want to note that the list isn't exhaustive. We do recognize there could be other options out there. We only looked at 10 counties. We did not look at all 36 counties or any city procedures as well. But these are generally the options that we identified through our research. And our goal was to provide the board with as many options as possible. It's really not meant to advocate in any specific direction, so we don't have a recommendation today, but we'll go through each of the options that we've been able to find. And then also I want to mention that these options have been revised a little bit from the last list that we provided to you, and that's due to the evolution of our understanding of case law and other options that are out there. So I'll talk about options, but understanding that from the last discussion, there was some discussion about looking at sort of a middle ground between the old procedure or former procedure and the current procedure. But of course, there is also the option to retain the existing code that's on the books, like a do-nothing approach. So the options that we have identified are reverting back to the prior board appeal or elective board review procedure. Some considerations with that, again, are that it adds extensive time to the decision process to render a permit for an applicant. It's resource intensive for all parties as to the timeline. And also under the former elective review procedures, it is our understanding that decisions were often affirmed or ratified the board without additional review, without the the elective board review hearing or on the record hearing or de novo review. That there's the call-up procedure. I mentioned that other counties, several other counties have some version of a call-up procedure. And again, that's where the board can call up an application type to make a decision, or majority vote, they call up a decision during the appeal period. And functionally, that would need to be within, if it was with a decision that wasn't an initial decision, that would need to be within the 12-day appeal period. So that 12-day appeal period does present a bit of a time constraint, but there's ways that other counties do this. If the board wanted to pursue this option, that would involve a Type 4 code amendment to add a new application procedure, as well as and/or revise appeal procedures. So the other option is the hearing's official decision serves as the final decision. So some counties have hearings officer decisions. Again, I mentioned there was a couple we found. They leave their hearings official decisions as the final decision, with only appeals of Type 3 applications or policy interpretations that are reviewed by the board. So similarly, if the board would like to go in this direction, then that option would involve a Type 4 code amendment to delete the current procedure, in which the planning director may request board review. Another option might be refine the current criteria in which a decision can be elevated for board review, or elevate more decisions under the current procedure, or both. So the criteria for the planning director to elevate appeals to the hearings official could be amended to be more clear and objective, and provide more clarity and certainty for all parties regarding when appeals will be elevated to the board. I already mentioned the criteria adopted by Lane Code 140805 were by and large the same criteria that existed for decades for the former procedure. So if the board would like to proceed with this option, then a code amendment would be needed. And then I did want to mention, so some circumstances resulted in past decisions not being elevated to the board even when the review criteria were seemingly met. So just some examples of that are when a specific issue already had come before the board and the board had declined to review the matter under the previous appeal procedure. Another example is when a LUBA decision had already been rendered on a substantially similar issue. Change of staff and or the applicant or representation had indicated their interest in appealing to LUBA. So just a few examples. Another example is an issue or a decision might not recur with frequency, or an application type might not recur with frequency. But I did want to mention, if the board chooses not to amend the code, but proceed under the current procedures that are on the books, and wishes to review more appeals, the board could still request that the planning director, with some parameters, send more matters up to the board. And we would just mention that there's some quasi-judicial considerations that should be factored in there. And then another option.
Excuse me, Amber. Question from the board. Commissioner Sanaga.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to picture this. So, like, what would those parameters look like? What would you set up? Because everything's so gray area, kind of. You know, what could be a definitely this is, definitely this isn't? What would that look like?
County council.
You can go. Baptism by fire.
Sorry. Welcome to Lane County.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead and give your. We talked internally yesterday. I'm 2 days into the job, by the way, so I'm just getting involved in this. Tiffany is involved, and I got brought in just because of some of my experience with deference and all that. But Amber had mentioned some different types of decisions being, even if it's not in the code, you could give direction for the planning director to push up certain types of applications. We could have, I don't know, we'd have to discuss it. I mean, probably beyond today. There's going to be more discussion about what that might look like. We could certainly, in that time period in between, give you some more ideas, types of decisions, or, interpret. The reason that you would be pulling something up arguably is so that you can interpret the code yourself. So anything that involves interpretation of the code or the plan would be something that, the board would have more interest in reviewing than other things. So those are some examples, but we could definitely, look again at some of the examples that Amber had pulled up of different counties and how they do that in their code and kind of try to borrow some of those parameters.
Yeah, perfect. I like that.
Did you have a question?
Well, if we're on the question thing, go ahead. If we're doing a round, yeah.
Well, I just briefly, and this may be broader than today because we've touched on a lot of different things, but what I'm interested in hearing, not necessarily today, but in follow-up, is how any or all of these changes could potentially impact past decisions, basically closed cases. Is it just people, would people be able to restart a process that seemed already to be
anything
settled?
that's done dead, meaning that there's been a final decision that either hasn't been appealed or it has been appealed and has come down and is final. There's nothing here would impact anything that's already been decided.
Thank you. Vice Chair, did you have a question?
Yeah, just two quick ones. When you said like a call-up procedure like some of the other counties do, would this be generated by a majority of the board decision, or could an individual commissioner call one up? How would that be decided on how that would happen? And the second question is maybe for like a specific issue, would it be fair to say that maybe a LUBA reprimand would generate a board review?
So, do you want to answer the first one?
Can I answer the first one? Do you want to take the second one? So, in our research of other counties' codes, my understanding is that there was one example where they spoke with commissioners and understood whether it's something that was of interest to the majority of the board. And then there's another version where where they brought the decision to the board and the board voted during the appeal period.
So it's like a head nod or a vote process. Yeah, it's kind of like
some sort of voting process.
So, and then the second part of it was LUBA remand?
Yeah, I mean, if there was some specific issues that we parametered out for, the hearings officials say, okay, if these criteria are met, would a LUBA remand be a unique enough situation to warrant the board to look at that? Or is LUBA remands more common than I might think?
They're pretty common, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, I do think that remands from LUBA are an interesting animal because a lot of codes don't really give a very good direction on what do you do in a remand. We now know that the party has to initiate the remand with the county, which we didn't used to know that. But generally speaking, what happens is the decision goes back to the decision maker that made the initial decision. But that's kind of just a fallback position. I mean, the board could say, either through code or not through code, I think, that if something's coming back on remand, it's probably controversial enough that the board wants to, at least yay or nay. That's something I'm just speaking off the top of my head, but I think that that's something that the board could look at as a way of being more involved in some of those land usey type things.
Yeah, well, thank you, and welcome to the team.
Yeah, thanks.
Council Johnson, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll add. In the council's office, we can research this issue more. My experience in different jurisdictions, unless the code says that the council or the commission can look at something on remand, as Ann said, it goes back to the original decision maker. So if the county would like a different process, it might require a code amendment. So we would need to research that issue a little bit more to give you a definitive answer.
Thank you. And Commissioner Buck has a comment or question.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have a lot of questions surrounding the financial implications of any changes that we make. And I know that's not being covered really today. And it sounds like we're going to have some additional conversation or work sessions regarding this. If there are, if the majority of the board is interested in changing the way that we currently do things and to what level, it would be really important to know what the additional costs associated with the planning department are going to be, knowing that this is a fund of ours that is really constrained. So I just want to put that out there for some feedback for our next work session. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trigger. Now, this is the only time I'm going to talk, so I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. No, I'm kidding about that part. First thing I want to say is I'm just really excited personally about the team that I see in front of me right now, because you represent a new set of eyes, you represent deep experience, and you represent a long time on the job with Lane County. To me, that's a wonderful combination. You know, I think, Councilor Davis, you said that you're new on the job 2 days with an asterisk, right? You know, I mean, your deep experience is going to be a large part of how we're able to move forward with some of the complexities of land use laws. I always lament the complexity of Oregon land use laws. And while Senate Bill 100 was intended to simplify things, make things better, it really served to make things more interpretable at the different counties levels. And that's what we experience on a regular basis. And that complexity leads people to think they can do things, they think they should be able to do things that they really can't do. And sometimes find ways to do things that we didn't think that they could do. And that's a part of the complexity. And that's the part of this board's decision in bringing things forward is, are there things that are complex enough that we need to have greater clarity whether there is an absolute dead end or if we can find a way to yes. And that's what the discussion is going to be from this point forward. And I appreciate that Commissioner Buck answered one of the options I think that he gave to us. Do we want to set up further board discussion on this particular topic? That was one of the options. I think Commissioner Buck just gave that option. Yes, we would like to talk more about this because it is going to be, it's going to surface over and over again because of the nature of Oregon land use laws. And Ms. Bell, I love hearing you talk. Every word you say has content. You say a lot of words because there are a lot of words to say. And look around at the audience and how well the audience is listening to you. Oregon land use laws does this. Everybody's gone except for our director and a man who has to write about it. You know, so the fact is, it's eye glazing, but every word is so important. So that's why it really is important that we have a point in time where we as the board can have a bond of trust with this team and the others involved to make sure that we're getting the right information going forward. And very specifically providing the right information to people who think they can do something but they can't, or who think they can do something and by golly we find a way that they can. So once again, I love this. This is a really exciting moment in time for me.
Thank you, Commissioner. So just in the interest of time, I'm looking at, we have 20 minutes before we lose Metro. So if you could think about when is a good stopping place, because we do still have a little bit more board business before we conclude for the day.
I had two more options I was going to go over, and I believe County Council has a few comments.
I can or not, depending on the time.
Okay, so another option, again, a couple other counties have this in their codes, is we could change the code to allow something that is specifically focused on interpretation of locally adopted code or plan revisions to come before the board. So it would be a new application procedure, presumably, that an applicant could file for, and then that could either be appealed to the board, it could come directly to the board, it could go to the planning director or the hearings official first. So that's something that is also an option that could be explored. And I will note a significant, and this came out of the interviews with other county staff, a significant advantage to this that we understand is that if it is just focused on interpretation and it's not defined as, the application type is not defined as a permit, there's a really specific meaning of permit that's defined in state law, and that talks about for the proposed development of land. If it doesn't meet that definition, then it's not subject to the timelines. So that gives more time for the process to, for that interpretation to come before the board. And then there also was the interpretation within a decision that was in the past code, as I mentioned, that was taken out. So that is an option, but there's other considerations with that, like timelines. So we could explore that more. And both of those options would involve a code amendment. Again, there are examples where I mentioned the higher procedure type can be appealed to the board, like type 3 applications, like zone changes or telecommunication towers, things of higher level complexity. And then just the last thing I'll mention is if the board direction is to amend the code, then it might be prudent to take a look at the number of hearings official reconsiderations that are currently allowed. There's currently no limit, so there could be 2-3 reconsiderations before a final decision of the county is issued. So again, if the board is interested in exploring any one of these options, or just to continue this discussion, we'd be happy to set a third work session and take a deeper dive into these options.
Great. Thank you for that. Thanks again for your flexibility, and sorry we shortened your time. I know you spend a lot of time preparing and then we shortened, but we will get to it, and I think it's better for all of us if we do it at a time when we can really let it breathe and get our questions answered. And this is an internally driven sort of curiosity and function driven. There's no hard timeline for us to, we're not up against any timeline to conclude this business. So we will work with your department, with the Office of Legal Counsel, and with the agenda team to figure out when to bring this back to dig in a little more, hear anything that you didn't get to present to us today, and then see where we want to go next. Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board before we move on from this item? Seeing none. Any final comments or questions from the staff that would help clarify next steps?
Thank you, Chair. If I may ask, if the board has any, I know that time is limited, if there is a couple of extra minutes, if the board does have any specific direction on areas that we should focus on for the next work session, that would be helpful.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. This is really general. And I know you love specifics because you talk specifics, but I'm going to always have two questions, and you're accustomed to these two questions. One, does what we're doing exceed, or is it more restrictive than state or other law? I always ask that question. And if it is, why? What's the reason? Is it a good reason, and is it necessary? And the second is, does it add to the cost or reduce the availability of housing in Lane County? If so, why? And is it a condition, or can we address that? Those are just two general questions, and I know you're accustomed to answering those questions, and you've done a good job always. So that's
My name is Violet Douglas, and I'm a deputy sheriff. I work in corrections, so I work at the Lane County Adult Corrections Facility. I work housing, and I work booking. So I lodge people in jail, and then I also facilitate different things once they're housed. My dad is a deputy sheriff, and I always noticed how much he absolutely loved his job. Every day is a gift, and it honestly seemed for like most of my life growing up, every single day he went to work, he didn't work a day in his life. He just loved it so much, and I really wanted.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
So that brings us to commissioner business. Are there any announcements from commissioners this morning? Seeing none. Are there future board assignment requests? And I have, one's a request and one's a clarification. Anything from anyone else? All right. So I just want to clarify, confirm, it's my assumption that the order that we took no action on associated with charter amendments this morning will just roll into the 9th, same order with a new date. Is that right?
I believe that's accurate.
Okay, thank you. And then it was talked about a couple of weeks ago and then brought up again today, this notion of releasing attorney-client privilege on specific material. I wonder if it would benefit, I know it would benefit me, if it would benefit the board for us to have some input or advisement from our, maybe our general counsel, interim counsel, on considerations and complexities of releasing attorney-client privilege materials broadly, sparked by the specificity of this one item, but just to give us that general guidance, guidelines, so that we understand what we're doing should we take that action on this particular item and also for future reference. Is that something everyone would like? Okay, great.
I like that, a newer set of eyes to look at it from a distance. Excellent.
And that's not a particular person in an office who's working on a particular memo. It's really just a broad, basically it's sort of a training for us to understand what the ramifications of an action like that are. Great, and we will work with our, looks like, good morning, Mr. Condit is with us again from Miller Nash. Good morning, did you want to weigh in on this request?
Good morning, everyone. I've been sitting and listening to the meeting, and we'd be happy to do a short memo on when and how to consider release of privileged information.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and thank you for being attentive to our business this morning. We appreciate that. With that, then, just a review of assignments.
So that then would be the assignment. Thank you. And I had flagged that as something to really understand the ramifications and the possible precedent-setting nature of that. So thank you. That's the only assignment.
Is there any other business?
I did want to point out for the record that all of your decisions yesterday were either 5-0 or in two cases where people needed to recuse themselves were 4-0. You had a very solid day, both days. So thank you. And thank you for introducing Ann Davies. Please remember that there's, you should have received a memo on June 13th from Aaron Pettigrew talking about which county council staff are doing what assignments, and Ann was in there. I hope there was probably a welcome to Ann at some point, so it wasn't a complete surprise to see her come sit here today.
Thank you for that. We have no need for executive session this morning, and so at the sound of my gavel, we will be adjourned. We are down next week, and so our next scheduled meeting of the Board of Commissioners is Tuesday, July 9th, and or Wednesday, the 10th. We are adjourned.
See you all.